The neon signs of Station Althera flickered in 17 different languages, casting prismatic shadows across the docking bay where Jasper Chen wiped grease from his calloused hands. His engineering jumpsuit bore the scars of 1,000 repairs. Much like the freighters that limped into his workshop seeking salvation, he checked his wrist comm for the third time in as many minutes, anxiety coiling in his stomach like a malfunctioning gravity coil. "Papa, you're nervous," came a small voice from behind a disassembled thruster assembly. Jasper turned to see his daughter Mira, all of 7 years old, peering at him with eyes too knowing for her age. She sat cross-legged among the spare parts, a datapad balanced on her knees, supposedly doing homework but clearly monitoring her father instead. "I'm not nervous, kiddo. Just checking the time. Aunt Wei said Eleanor is really nice. She's a nurse at the xenobiology wing." Mira's voice carried that particular tone of hope that children use when they desperately want their parents to be happy. Jasper smiled, despite himself. We had been relentless about this blind date, insisting that 2 years was long enough to grieve, long enough to be alone. The memory of his late wife Sarah still ached like a phantom limb, but perhaps Wei was right. Perhaps it was time. The restaurant was called the Gravity Well, a mid-tier establishment that catered to the station's diverse population. Jasper arrived early, Mira's hand clasped firmly in his. He'd arranged for Wei to pick her up after introductions. No point in making the kid sit through an awkward dinner if things went. South Eleanor arrived precisely on time. Jasper's first thought was that she wasn't human. His second thought was that Wei had spectacularly undersold the description, nurse. Eleanor stood nearly 7 feet tall, her scales shimmering with an iridescent quality that shifted from deep emerald to gold depending on the angle of the light. Her species, the Draconi, were relatively new to the Galactic Union, having achieved FTL capability only 3 decades prior. She wore a simple dress that accommodated the subtle ridge of scales along her spine and the elegant tail that swayed behind her with unconscious grace. "You must be Jasper," she said, her voice carrying a melodic quality, almost like wind chimes. "And this must be Mira." The little girl stared up in undisguised wonder. "You're a dragon!" Eleanor's laugh was genuine, her amber eyes crinkling at the corners. "My people get that a lot from human children. Your Earth mythology was remarkably prescient." The introductions went smoothly. Wei arrived to collect Mira, who hugged her father and whispered, "She's so cool, Papa," before leaving with barely concealed excitement. Then came the dinner itself. The conversation started pleasantly enough. Eleanor spoke about her work at the xenobiology wing, the challenges of treating 17 different species with radically different physiologies. Jasper talked about his repair shop, the satisfaction of bringing dead ships back to life with nothing but spare parts and human ingenuity. But as the meal progressed, Jasper felt a growing disconnect. Eleanor was intelligent, kind, clearly good with children, everything Wei had promised. Yet something fundamental was missing. She discussed her career with passion, but asked little about Mira beyond polite pleasantries. She mentioned her own aspirations, a research position on Draconi Prime, advancement opportunities in xenomedicine, but showed little interest in the messy reality of Jasper's life as a single father, barely keeping his business afloat. When she began explaining, with admirable patience, the efficient child-rearing practices of her homeworld, something in Jasper finally settled into place. This wasn't going to work. It wasn't Eleanor's fault. She was wonderful by all objective measures, but Jasper had learned the hard way that compatibility wasn't about checking boxes. It was about finding someone who understood that his daughter wasn't an inconvenience to be managed efficiently, but the center of his entire universe. He made it through dessert, paid his half of the bill despite Eleanor's polite protests, and prepared to deliver the kindest possible rejection. "Eleanor, you're amazing," he began, and watched her scales dim slightly. She knew what was coming. "But I don't think we're looking for the same things right now. I hope that's okay." She studied him for a long moment, her reptilian features unreadable. Then she nodded slowly. "I understand. Thank you for your honesty." They parted ways outside the restaurant, cordial but distant. Jasper felt relief wash over him as he headed back to his workshop, already planning to call Wei and apologize for wasting everyone's time. He didn't expect to find Eleanor waiting by his shop entrance 2 hours later. She stood in the flickering light of his sign, her medical bag slung over one shoulder, looking somehow smaller than she had at dinner. I couldn't leave, she said simply. Not like that. Jasper stopped, confused. Eleanor, let me finish. She took a breath, her scales rippling with chromatic emotion. At dinner, I was performing, being the person I thought I should be. Efficient, career-focused, very Draconai. She smiled sadly. But I watched your face when you talked about Mira. The way you unconsciously checked your comm to make sure Wei hadn't sent an emergency message. The way you apologized for the grease under your fingernails even though you'd clearly scrubbed them raw. She stepped closer. On my world, we're taught that emotional attachment is impractical, that children should be raised communally, rationally. But I left Draconai Prime because I didn't believe that. I wanted to understand other species, other ways of being. Jasper's throat tightened. What are you saying? I'm saying I panicked. I tried to be what I thought you'd want, and instead I became someone neither of us could connect with. She looked down at her clawed hands. The truth is, I loved watching you with your daughter. I loved that she's clearly the center of your world. And I'd like a chance to get to know both of you properly, if you're willing. No performance this time, just me, through the window of his shop. Jasper could see Mira's drawing pinned to his workbench, a crude crayon sketch of the three of them. Him, her, and a large green figure labeled Dragon Nurse Lady. He looked back at Eleanor, at the vulnerability in those alien eyes, and felt something shift in his chest. How about coffee? He asked. Real coffee this time. In my workshop. Mira should be awake for another hour, and she'd love to hear about your work. The real stuff, not the dinner party version. Eleanor's scales brightened, shifting to warm gold. I'd like that very much. As they walked inside together, Jasper reflected on the curious nature of connection, how it couldn't be forced or engineered, how it required the courage to be genuinely, essentially yourself. The blind date had failed, but something else, something real, was just beginning. Humanity had taught the galaxy many things since joining the Union. Persistence, creativity, the stubborn refusal to accept that anything was impossible. But perhaps the most important lesson was this, that love in all its forms was worth showing up for. Worth trying again. Worth staying even when leaving would be easier. And sometimes, just sometimes, the bravest thing you could do was admit you'd been wrong and ask for a second chance.